Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and I'm going to be looking forward to spending as much time with you today as you have available, because for the next couple of hours, I got Dr. Andy Schuttinga with me in the studio, and in hour two, Jeff Verdorn is going to wrap up his study in 2 Thessalonians. So that's what I have scheduled today. Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3 is a memory verse that I've had for a long time, and that is this: you will keep in perfect peace whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. When it comes to our minds, that is a very complicated thing. And Dr. Andy Schuttinga is a psychology professor, and I've asked him today to join in a discussion and coach us on the defense mechanisms that we have in our psyches. We have responses, and it helps us with our feelings of anxiety or threats or things that we don't want to deal with or to think about. And I think as we get closer and closer to a busy holiday season, I have a feeling that some of us might use our ego defense mechanisms as a way of dealing with challenging situations. Andy, always nice to have you on the show. Welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have told me that you were Teacher of the Year at your school, because now I can't help but to bring that. I can't help but to bring that up.
That's very kind of you.
It's a very sweet honor.
Yeah, it was really meaningful. It was pretty cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about how complicated our egos, our minds can be. We are always looking for ways to do coping and possibly self-preservation.
Yeah.
And I know that there are so many different ways that we go about doing that. So maybe we can start by just defining what the defense mechanism is.
Yeah, you have to go back about 100 years or so.
I can do that.
To our dear old friend, Dr. Sigmund Freud.
I was afraid you were going to bring him up.
I know,
yeah,
but I have to, because
that's okay.
What a lot of people don't want to accept is that Freud, despite his flaws in his theory, he had some serious flaws, not only in his theory, but as a human being.
Sure.
Right? I mean, we all are sinners, but he had some particularly kind of repulsive ideas about the nature of women and so on and so forth. And we're not going to get into that today.
That's not the point.
No. The point is, and I firmly believe, as a psychologist, I firmly believe this, there's a lot of truth in psychology that comes from God through decidedly non-Christian people. Mm-hmm. And Freud was one of those people, but he had some brilliant ideas. And one of his longest staying and most tried and true theoretical models is the idea of defense mechanisms. And just for a brief history, a defense mechanism, in Freud's model of personality, you have the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is kind of that dark unconscious that has lots of thoughts. And some of them are good and some of them are bad. It's mostly, hey, what I want, go get it, right?
Mm-hmm, okay.
That's the id. The ego is the conscious part of us in his model that says, hey, I'm really hungry. The id says, I'm really hungry. And the ego says, well, okay, we'll get some food. And there's a plate of cookies that don't belong to us. The superego is kind of the moral center of your being. And that's also below the surface. It says, no, you can't just take what you want. The id says, I don't care. Take whatever you want. And the ego's job is kind of balance those two.
This sounds like a Three Stooges movie right now.
Yeah, you know what I
we
equate
can't
it
take
to?
The cookies?
Well, remember in all the old cartoons, like the Looney Tunes?
Yeah.
Where the character was contemplating an important decision, and then all of a sudden, poof, on one shoulder is the devil.
Yes.
That always has a Brooklyn accent, right? Hey, you should take the cookies. They're good, right?
Yeah,
and it has a pitchwitch. It's the devil, right?
Yeah.
And then the other side is the angel that sounds like Roma Downey. Oh, no, don't take the cookie, right? That's wrong. And
I didn't know you were going to be doing voices today.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I had this prepared like hours ago.
Well, you should have warned me.
I practiced.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Why? Did you know anything about this?
What if I
about the
said
voices?
What if I said yes?
Oh, that'd be even scarier.
I know. I didn't tell anybody because I knew you'd say, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what his model looks like, right? You've got
Okay.
the id saying, do whatever you want,
Yeah.
get what I want.
Yeah.
The super ego says, no, we must always follow the rules. And so these defense mechanisms, to get to the point, serve as a way to protect us, our conscious ego, from what are sometimes really negative and maybe even evil thoughts
Okay.
and desires. And what Freud probably didn't realize was that in the long term, these would be the things of his theory that made the most sense to people, because research has proven over and over that we do this all the time. And they're actually quite accurate. And we can go through all the major ones that he has and some newer ones too that we really do, and we see them all the time. And as we talk about them, I guarantee you every listener out there is going to say, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
At least once, I've done that, or I do that a lot. We do these things.
Andy, it's
regularly.
because our minds are complicated, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
And this is why I go back to, the Isaiah 26:3 verse. You will keep in perfect peace whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you.
Yeah.
And that whole idea about taking every thought captive to Christ. Now, when we do that, I think we're much better able to process life. But as we look at the ways our brains are compartmentalized, there's all these different defense mechanisms we use to try to keep our head above water.
Yeah.
Many days.
And he named them perfectly. We're protecting ourselves because not every thought that comes to our mind is a good one, but also the kind of external or extrinsic things going on around us, they don't always make us feel good either. If someone tells you, hey, you're doing a really bad job of this, there's a lot of defense mechanisms that we can utilize to protect ourselves.
Sure.
Like denial. I am not. I'm very good at this.
Right.
I'm not. I am happy. Why do you say I'm not happy? Right? Or, you can regress. You can just crawl under a blanket on your couch or your bed for 3 hours because somebody told you something you didn't like.
Sure.
It's not a very mature way to handle things, but that's something that we do to protect ourselves.
Yeah. So Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. He's a psychology professor. And let's start by talking about a healthy ego defense mechanism. There's something called sublimation.
Yeah.
This is where individuals will channel a negative or unacceptable impulse into something productive.
Yeah. That's a good one.
You can't rake that lawn in 30 minutes. Oh, really?
That's kind of like reverse psychology, which, by the way, is
that sublimation or is that something
kind of
completely
a myth.
different?
Well, it kind of is when you put it that way.
Okay.
It is a little bit. I think another example would be you have some really angry feelings towards a friend or your spouse,
Sure.
or whatever, somebody that you care about that you can't just blow up at because A, that's not the right thing to do, and B, you don't really want to do something like that. So you've got a pile of rocks in your backyard that needs to be moved. So you go out and you say, I'm so mad, I'm just going to go out and move those rocks. I'm going to go chop wood. I'm going to go for a walk.
You're going to
Those
go
are all
jogging.
positive things. Yeah, I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to go axe throwing.
Yeah. Why'd you have to bring up axe throwing? That seems weird.
It's really fun.
I'm sure.
Oh, I've done it before. It's
Wyatt's shaking his head,
cool.
too. He loves axe throwing.
Yeah, isn't it great?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
I
So
highly
anyway.
recommend it. That's
Okay.
great sublimation activity,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen.
So it's taking something that would be negative or unacceptable and turning it into something positive. So there's something that's a healthy ego defense mechanism. Is there another healthy ego defense mechanism after that?
Probably not.
I would hate to think we got to turn negative already.
No, there are some secondary ones. This was not one of Freud's originals, but like altruism, I think is actually tied pretty closely to sublimation. Deciding to do something nice for someone with nothing in return. Maybe you're having a bad day and you are in line at Starbucks and you pay for the next person's coffee.
Yeah.
That's altruism, right? You're doing it. Now, it works better when they don't know it's you. I would say that's not very altruistic when you're standing in front of somebody and you say, I'm going to buy this person's coffee behind me, because you're going to get the feedback from them. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think that's a very altruistic thing to do, honestly.
Yeah.
And there's some argument about whether it's even possible to kind of commit altruism. I say no, because I think even the most quote unquote unselfish acts are tinged with sin because we're sinful people, right? So
Indeed.
you can't avoid that. But I think altruism might be one of those. But I mean, off the top of my head, none of them are particularly positive.
Mm-hmm. It's sometimes hard to understand the way your brain even thinks because you have defense mechanisms and you sometimes just use whatever's available in the moment because you're trying to do self-preservation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we probably develop habits around defense mechanisms that we kind of our go-to move. You know, like, for example, some people are more naturally prone to denial. No, I did not do that. Or no, that really isn't what they meant. Or, you know, something along those lines. I'm just going to deny the fact that something negative happened, or I'm going to deny these feelings that I have. I'm just going to pretend like they don't exist.
Well, and Andy, it could be something pretty substantial. It could be something fairly traumatic. And you go, what happened to you?
Yeah.
And they're living in denial. Oh, it's nothing. It was fine.
Yeah.
And you go, no, that's not fine.
No, that's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
That's also one of the stages of grief. One of the 5 stages of grief is denial. Nope, my husband is not gone. He's not. He's just not breathing right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a very common part of death. Is denial, and I think that's actually it's pretty healthy and pretty common to go through that stage as long as it doesn't last for weeks on end. Because you have to bury somebody, but that's a defense mechanism that you see in other areas of psychology too.
Yeah, so denial would be just kind of an outright refusal to admit or even to recognize that something has occurred or is currently occurring.
Correct.
And I've heard from many, many people on the text line about how they're in a pattern or a rut and they're trying to act like everything is going to be okay, and yet they've been living with it for a long time.
Yeah, it's not abuse. He's just kind of rough
He's had a
sometimes.
bad day.
Yeah, he doesn't have anger management issues. He's just learned how to yell a lot from his parents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, actually, that is abuse. You're being emotionally abused. You're being physically abused. That is what's happening. No, it's really not. You don't understand, and so that can be a real problem.
So you could be admitting that something is true, but maybe just trying to minimize its importance.
Yep. That's a great way to do it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dr. Andy Schuttinga is my guest. We're talking today about our very complicated minds. Andy's a psychology professor, and every time he comes on, I try to pick his brain so he can tell us about our brains. And today we're talking about defense mechanisms, and we're going to go through a bunch of these. And Andy is pretty sure you're going to see yourself in one or many of these illustrations. So if you have a question or comment about anything we discuss, you're so welcome to send a question over. I would encourage you to do so. The number is 877-933-2484. Again, 877-933-2484. We'll be right back with Andy in just a minute. You've probably heard me talk about hope quite a bit this season, and I think it's because we need to hear more about it. We need to encourage one another with hope. We need to build one another up with the hope that we have in Christ. And if you are feeling lonely, or maybe you are having periods of disappointment or despair, and you need hope, we want you to know that you can always come to God's Word for hope. Hope will always be there for you, waiting. And if you are struggling to make it to the next moment, I want you to be able to text the word HOPE to 877-933-2484. I'm back with Dr. Andy Schuttinga. He's a psychology professor, and today we're talking about defense mechanisms. We've got a lot of things going on in our heads that try to protect us and do self-preservation, and Andy is going to help us walk through some of this. Now, Andy, I think we all understand a little bit about what displacement is, where you have a bad day at work and you go home and you take your frustration out on your family or your friends.
I think this is one of easily the most common ones of the defense mechanisms, because it's so easy for us to have really frustrated feelings that we don't feel like we can express to certain people.
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it's coworkers or somebody who has some level of superiority over us, whether it's a coach or a manager or a boss.
Sure.
If your boss says something that's maybe really offensive to you or hurtful, you can't just blow up at your boss. And so a lot of people probably hang on to that, and they carry that frustration, and they get home, and their spouse or their kids, or even a friend that they're meeting says something that, might be slightly offensive, and you just kind of blow up at them. And we do this because we know, and you might think, well, why would you do that to somebody you love? Well, because they love you, or
right.
because they're good friends with you and you have a deep relationship with them. They'll probably forgive you later, or they'll probably understand, or you'll be able to have an opportunity to explain yourself and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Here's why. Whereas with other relationships, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the sublimation piece comes in. And it's honestly, it's one of those things that it's probably not the best to do because you're potentially hurting somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of an effective defense mechanism,
yeah.
It's really effective because you're protecting yourself from ruining a relationship that might have significant costs to it.
Sure.
Because the person might not forgive you. They might say, you know what? On second thought, go find a new job.
Yeah. Or
you can't be part of this group, or you can't do this anymore because
right.
now you've kind of not only burned the bridge, but you erased it completely. So you're done. And so we got to be really careful with that. The way to handle it, obviously, is to maybe have a rational conversation with the person who offended you or hurt you in a professional way or a more personal way. And then you don't have to worry about going home and taking it out on anybody else.
Sure. Have you ever had the thought, am I getting somebody else's mail right now?
That's interesting. I've never thought of that phrase, but yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I like that one.
Because I think that would be a perfect example of displacement.
Oh, sure.
Somebody, you have a friend that starts saying something to you, and you're going, whoa, am I getting somebody else's mail right now?
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. Oh, it's just I just copyrighted it.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks.
I might have to use that.
It's got a patent pending right now.
Yeah. Well, I teach this personality theories class every fall.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can remember that one.
I'll remind you.
For displacement.
All right.
You're getting somebody else's mail.
So here's a denial question that just came in. Is it denial if you have physical pain that the doctors have told you that they can't help you? And after a few months of being really down in the dumps about it, you finally accept it and are living with joy and strength and courage and not being a Debbie Downer anymore.
Wow, that's an interesting scenario.
It's very courageous.
Absolutely.
For her to put that down in a text. And if you have physical pain and the doctors can't identify it, you have physical pain.
Yeah.
You have real pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're not in
denial.
There's a thing called psychosomatic.
I was going to use that
pain,
word, but
right?
I thought I'd better not do it with a professional psychologist in the studio.
It would have been the right word because
I know. I was thinking about using that.
We do have that, right? There are many people who suffer from chronic pain, and it's psychosomatic, which essentially means it's in your head. It's a head symptom. It's not a physical symptom, but you do feel the pain. We feel pain from a lot of different things, and our pain centers light up in brain imaging when we just hear something that's painful to somebody else. Like if you watch a video of somebody getting slapped across the face, you actually, if you've ever felt something like that, your brain will light up to say, I know what that feels like.
Sure.
I've seen commercials for these power slap guys. It's like a boxing match, except you just slap the guy in front of you.
We don't really watch the same TV shows.
Oh, it's a commercial. I don't watch. No, that has no entertainment value for watching people slap each other. But when you see the commercial, you're like, wow, that hurts.
Yeah.
Because you are able to empathize with that feeling. Because we've all been hit across the face, whether it's somebody slapped us or on accident. You know what that feels like, right? Yeah. And so that kind of ties back into what we were talking about. You can feel pain without having anything physical happen to you. So it could be denial. You might be denying something. You might not. I mean, that's a tricky one because I've known plenty of people who have had pain for years, and doctors couldn't figure out what it was, and then one day they could. Yeah.
Do you mind if I cross-reference other people in your profession?
Not at all.
Oh, good, because a guest of mine, Jody Goldie, said that you carry your trauma in your body.
Yeah, there's growing evidence about that.
In your body.
Mm-hmm.
So you carry it. So if you've gone through trauma or something, you've got it in you.
Yeah.
So if you are feeling pain, maybe it's for a real reason, and you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone who is struggling with chronic pain that is kind of undiscoverable by doctors. I would recommend if you aren't, that you start working with a therapist and
probably
try to
helpful.
get to the heart of, what cognitively might be going on for you that's causing that pain. It could be something old. And, we haven't talked about it yet, but there's another defense mechanism called repression.
That was next on my list. You can believe it.
I sensed it.
No, did you?
I am a psychologist.
You're good.
I know.
You're good.
I could be good once in a while. Or I'm lucky. It's one or the other.
One or the other.
I'm going to say good. We'll just go with that.
We'll stick with that.
But a lot of people we can't really repress memories. I mean, that's an idea that a lot of people have, that I have all these repressed memories, and we can try to repress them, but you can't just completely erase a memory from your mind. You can stop thinking about it. You can forget about it for a long time, but it's still going to be there. And like you were talking about, when trauma, it's kind of imprinted in you, whether you like it or not. And so I think sometimes people who are dealing with pain like that, it probably often is tied into something that's unresolved in their life that they really haven't been able to experience true healing for. And it's a lot like ripping up an old scab or scar.
Mm-hmm.
You have to open it up again.
Sure.
And you have to dig in, and that's hard. It's hard work, and it can be really painful to go through something like that and revisit it. But in the end, the healing is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Because like people with knee injuries, if they don't get everything out, you're going to have to go back and scope it out and get those loose bodies out, shave off that extra tendon piece that never healed up right. We have that emotionally too.
Yeah.
And it's okay to go back and get some help for something that you haven't fully resolved.
Andy, is the old saying, you deal with it or it will deal with you. Is that fair?
I think it's pretty fair in a lot of cases. Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit more about repression. And it seems that that's information you try to keep out of your conscious awareness.
Oh, yeah.
And isn't that kind of healthy in some regards and unhealthy in others?
Yeah. I think it's unhealthy when you're kind of refusing to deal with something.
Okay.
It's tied a little bit to denial. You might not be denying it, but you're denying dealing with it. And so when you repress something, for example, someone you care about says something really hurtful to you, and it's tied to something that you could probably improve on, and you just repress it. I'm going to push that deep down inside myself. I don't want to deal with that again. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want you to bring it up. I just want it to go away. That's unhealthy repression.
Yeah. What if that goes on in marriages and it's something that happened 20 years ago and it's still under the rug?
Yeah,
and
that's
the rug
really
is really
unhelpful.
bumpy.
Yep. You're going to trip on that bump every time.
You can't vacuum the rug. You can't do much anymore because the rug is so bumpy.
It's a great analogy, the sweeping under the rug thing. I have used that one before too. And
Really?
yeah. And,
that one's not patent pending.
No.
The other one is, though.
Yeah, that one's kind of an old school one.
It's public domain. You can use that one all you
right?
want.
Yeah, like all the old hymns are all public domain now, right?
Yeah, but for a person who may have repressed memories, and maybe they had suffered something when they were younger, a child maybe, and they're to this day they're still having difficulty forming good relationships.
Yeah,
whether it's friendships or relationships at work or romantic relationships.
Yeah,
and if that repression is causing that much difficulty, then you got to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. It's like a rock in your shoe. You can get used to walking with it, but eventually you're going to feel it again. And until you get the rock out of your shoe, it's never going to completely go away.
No.
I think we all have things in our past, recent or long-term, that are hurtful and unpleasant to think about. But those things also shape who we are. And we can't just hide from our past, no matter how bad it is. You have to deal with it at some point, or it will come back. Eventually, it'll come back and get you.
Mm-hmm. Andy, what is suppression? I think we talked about repression, and I sort of get that, but suppression, I'm not sure if I understand what that is.
I think it's the same.
Okay.
I think it's very similar.
Okay. So
when suppressing something, repressing, it's more like
potato.
Repression is probably a little bit maybe older stuff, and suppressing something is probably maybe something that's newer.
Yeah. And
I would view those as basically the same thing.
is there a healthy side and a not healthy side to some of these conditions? Like suppression,
Yeah.
let's say, let me suppress my feelings about having my alarm go off at 5 and going for a 2-mile run because my mind wants to stay in bed, for example.
Yeah.
I'm going to suppress what I want to do in order to accomplish what I think I need to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Is that a
look
healthy
at it.
side of suppression?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would be the unhealthy side of suppression?
Same thing when you're just pushing stuff away. When you're, because suppressing is like crushing something down beneath the surface of your consciousness or your existence. So I think they're close enough.
Mm-hmm. What is intellectualization? That's even a big word to say.
Oh yeah. Well, that's when.
I practiced that before the show.
Did you really?
Yeah, because I thought I was going to bring that up. I wanted to make sure I got it out.
It is kind of they're not all the best worded things.
I kind of
Intellectualization is a little clunky to get out.
I kind of agree.
Yeah, actually, I just had to think how to say it myself. So.
Yeah.
That's when it's similar to rationalization. A great example is when, for example, you're involved with a funeral, and instead of dealing with the grief, you intellectualize the process of dealing with the funeral and all the details, and you want to talk about all of the nuts and bolts of planning a funeral,
Sure.
and don't want to talk about the actual
Event.
death.
Right, death. Mm-hmm.
That's a great way to do it, or that's a great example of it. Maybe something went poorly at work, and instead of just saying, I did a poor job on that, you find all the intellectually acceptable reasons why it wasn't a successful project, why it didn't work out. Well, it didn't work out because of these 5 things. When in the end, you're the one who did those 5 things poorly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on you. And so you can explain away intellectually using rational reason and logic why this didn't work out.
Well, what if you were diagnosed with something that was kind of scary, and instead of dealing with the distress of it, you start to intellectualize everything, and you can't really connect to people about it because you're so busy analyzing it.
Yeah, that's where it could actually be helpful to someone to cope with something really bad news. You know, you mentioned like you get a bad diagnosis, a health diagnosis, and the doctor says this is really serious. It's going to change your life, and it's going to be a huge battle for you, whatever it is. I think a lot of people will go to that intellectualization, talk about the disease or the illness. They'll learn all the important details about it, and they will learn all the treatment options, and they will do everything to talk about it and deal with it, minus the feelings part, the fear, the anxiety that goes with that. Mm-hmm. I think that's okay for a bit because you're getting such stunning news, such life-changing news.
Right.
A lot of these defense mechanisms are okay for a short amount of time, but when they become the norm for you, that's when it can become an unhealthy type of situation. Because in the end, you get a terrible diagnosis, you have to deal with it.
Yes, you do.
You can't pretend it's not there. You can't intellectualize it away.
Right.
You have to deal with your feelings. And so if that's a short-term fix, it's okay. But in the long term, you still need to get right with your feelings.
Our minds are certainly complicated.
Oh, yeah, they are.
And Isaiah 26, verse 3 says, you will keep in perfect peace whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. So we're going to take a little break, and we're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Andy Schuttinga about defense mechanisms. If anything you heard so far you'd like us to elaborate on, or you have a question about anything you've heard, you can text it over 877-933-2484, and we'll be right back with Andy.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Prime time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. Yeah. What's for dinner? It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
Welcome to the show. If you just tuned in, Dr. Andy Schuttinga is with me in studio, and we're talking about our defense mechanisms, of which we have many, I'm discovering.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was talking about, I quote other guests I have on. Mm-hmm. One of my faves, Todd Mulliken, says, that you should speak without being offensive and listen without being defensive.
Oh,
Isn't that solid?
that's really good.
Tell me about it.
I need that one. I need to
That's patent
remember that
pending
one.
too.
I bet it
Yeah,
is.
but it's Todd's patent pending.
Does he have a book?
Yeah, he's got several books.
Is it in it?
I don't know.
God, if that's in your book, you should definitely trademark that one.
All right, let's
good.
Yeah, because to be able to listen without being defensive and speak without being offensive was really it's a great format for communicating well.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do on both ends sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about projection because if you have qualities about yourself or feelings that you don't really like, you can just attach them to other people, can't you?
Absolutely. You blame other people for the feelings that you have about yourself.
Okay.
Because that's easier to swallow than recognizing it yourself. So, for example, you have a coworker or I don't know, we've been using coworkers a lot. I feel bad for the coworkers. But your coworker says nothing to you, but you're frustrated with your own work. So you say to your coworker, I know you're frustrated with me for the work that I'm doing, but I'm doing my best. Mm-hmm. Your coworker's like, what? I never said it. I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. But we do that because, again, it's easier. It's like sublimation, right? It's easier to take that from somebody else who doesn't mean as much to you than it is to take something like that from yourself. And people use projection quite a bit. You'll hear it in conversations. People will say things to each other, and you're like, you're projecting on them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will hear that, and I will see that. I get that with students sometimes too. They'll talk about professors don't like them, because they don't get good grades in their papers. And it's like, I don't think the professor even knows you very well. You're projecting that negative feeling because maybe you feel bad because you didn't do well in the paper, and it was because you did it at 2:00 in the morning the night before.
Okay, maybe we're doing a rationalization then, which is another defense mechanism.
There you go.
So I'm going to say my poor exam on my test, I'm going to blame the instructor.
Yeah.
For my poor exam, than admitting my own lack of preparation.
Yeah.
I go, if he was just a better instructor, I would have tested better.
Here's the secret sauce. Faculty members listening out there, you just tell them that before the first test. It's like, hey, look, I just want to be clear with all of you. If you do poorly on this test, it's not my fault. It's yours. Because I'm going to tell you basically what's on it, give you a kind of an idea of what's going on. So I take that one away from my college students, especially if they're in a psychology class. We get that one off the board right away. Mm-hmm. Can't use that defense mechanism. It's not my fault.
Yeah. So, Andy, if we're going to cope with our unhealthy defense mechanisms, and it sounds like from what we've talked about, there's several of them.
Yeah.
The sublimation sounds like one that's potentially healthier, but the rest of them feel a little bit dark and cloudy with a chance of rain. Does it not?
Yeah.
So how do we create a greater self-awareness?
Well, that's a really important part of the puzzle is recognizing when you're doing some of these things, recognizing that, oh man, I'm taking out my work frustration on my family.
Yeah.
Like, why am I yelling at my kids right now? It's because I'm still frustrated about what happened at work.
Sure.
Or in traffic or, whatever. I'm hanging on to anger for something else. So the most important step, I think, with these in particular is recognizing when you're utilizing a defense mechanism instead of hitting whatever your issue is head on and dealing with it face to face. When you're able to recognize when you are doing those things, that's when you can kind of intellectualize with yourself. Okay, I realize I'm feeling this way. Here's why. What's the source of my discomfort or my upsetness? It's this. I need to deal with whatever this is. Whether it's another person, then it means you need to go to that person and have, like the Bible says, and teachers always like to tell kids, if you have a problem with somebody, you need to go to them first, deal with it first. And so that's still what we need to do as adults. When we have a problem with somebody, we need to be direct with them and tell them the truth. And we need to, use I statements instead of you statements. I feel this way when you say things like this to me, instead of going home and holding that in and then blowing up at our family. That's one way to go about stopping yourself from taking these things and using them in unhealthy ways.
Yeah. Andy, let's talk a little bit more about rationalization, because I think that's probably one that everybody's got their fingers on in terms of that's the most readily accessible thing that someone would do. And it's a defense mechanism that probably involves explaining some unacceptable behavior or feeling kind of in a rational or logical manner, avoiding the true reason.
Yeah. It's a way for people to it's passing blame from something that you've probably done onto to someone else. Well, I had to react this way because you were rude to me. I had no other choice.
Right.
That's classic rationalization. I can explain my bad behavior to you because of a different reason, because of something else outside of me. So it's not really my fault. You made me do this. You made me feel really negative, so I'm acting negatively to you. And we can't do that because you're just saying I'm allowed to sin because someone sinned against me first.
Right.
That's basically, now Freud wouldn't have said that, but that's what it is. That's basically what it is.
Mm-hmm. So if we're avoiding the true reasons for the behavior, that is never going to end well. It's only going to make it more convoluted, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll definitely muddy the waters.
Yeah. Because
we're passing, a lot of these are about passing the blame for our own issues onto someone else because it's more palatable and it protects your ego.
Right.
All of these are about making myself feel better. All of these defense mechanisms are about protecting my feelings and protecting myself from looking bad, from taking responsibility, from basically from those two things. I'm able to justify whatever I've done with something else. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a freeing thing for people, even though it's really unhealthy and really, I shouldn't say really unhealthy, even though it's unhealthy and negative. It's not the best way to go about solving your problems.
Mm-hmm. When I do work in addiction recovery with men, this saying has bantered around recovery, and that is, when all else fails, tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to do that well sometimes. I think a lot of conflict is about telling the truth, but in an explosive way or a mean way or an insensitive way.
Right.
Or sometimes you're not even thinking of how you're doing. You're just telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that doesn't really look very good on you.
Or passive-aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's another thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I wasn't born in Minnesota. So, right.
Are you an East Coast guy?
No.
Where are you?
All over.
Oh, you're Colorado, aren't you?
Midwest. My parents live there.
That's
so I've
right.
lived on the West Coast, Arizona, Seattle, Indonesia, Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Minnesota. For those of you who are not from Minnesota, the passive-aggressive thing really is truly a way of life here.
Is it?
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. Give me an example.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, when somebody gave me a great example the other day. I can't remember what it was. It was something like, I can't remember.
That's okay. I put you on the spot. There's, it'll come to you at 2 a.m. So text me.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I still want to know what it is.
Now I will text you at 2 a.m.
That's all right. I don't have any notifications on my phone. It's not going to buzz.
That's a good idea.
So let's talk about, as believers, how do we learn better coping skills so we don't do defense mechanisms for protection, but we learn how to cope better. I mean, I think of, again, I'm going to go back to Isaiah 26:3. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you.
Yeah.
So if we take all thoughts and bring them to the Lord, take all thoughts captive, I think that's a great starting place for coping.
It absolutely is, because we are filled with negative thoughts every day. I mean, every day we question ourselves, we get mad at ourselves. I'll say things to myself like, you idiot, which is really kind of a strong word.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me when I say that to myself because it's, I don't take that seriously. It's more like that was not a very smart thing to do. Right? But a lot of people do have significant negative self-talk and they believe it. And that can be, negative. So we've talked about this, I think, a couple times before, how powerful negative self-talk can be for people.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
It is, and it's so unhelpful. And the more you do it, the more toxic it becomes in your own mind. And, we go back to the complexity of our mind and keeping our thoughts captive to the Lord. When we have negative self-talk, that is not godly at all. That's not of the Lord. And when we are engaging in that, it's important to say, okay, God, take that thought away from me. Help me to understand. Help me to remember that I'm created in your image, that I'm a child of you. And I need to stop talking about myself this way because I wouldn't talk this way about anybody else. And that's an important and helpful step that I think a lot of people could easily make when they catch themselves being really negative about themselves.
Mm-hmm. We were talking earlier, Andy, about some of the more common defense mechanisms. And I remember you bringing up altruism, which is trying to help somebody, which is a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. What about something like maybe humor, where people will use humor as a shield?
Oh, yeah.
And they will use it almost as a weapon.
Oh, yeah. Freud regarded humor as an aggressive move, that humor is aggressiveness. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't completely agree with that, but humor is definitely a defense mechanism. I mean, how many times have we all made a self-deprecating joke about ourselves or, I'm that guy, right? Something along those lines. But we definitely use weapon as a humor, or humor as a weapon. You can cut people to the core with a sarcastic comment.
Yeah, you can.
So easily. I've been very guilty of that in the past. When I was younger and less wise, and not that I'm so wise now, but when I was really less wise, I could make really cutting comments to my friends and family. Yeah. Meaning I just want to be funny, right? I like making people laugh. And, I've hurt some people badly doing that.
All right, we're going to take a little break. Dr. Andy Schuttinga is our guest. We're talking about defense mechanisms today. If you have a question or comment, you're so welcome to text it over 877-933-2484. Be right back. Hi, this is Bill Arnold. You might be the kind of person that goes to Paris and still listens to Faith Radio on the app. Or you might be more like the person that goes into the next room in your apartment and listens. The good news is using the app is just as easy in both places. Downloading the free app is crazy easy. Just text the word app to 877-933-2484 and click the link. And if you happen to be in Paris, there is a really nice little coffee shop not far from the Eiffel Tower that serves a really nice chocolate biscotti. The doctor is in the house, and that is Dr. Andy Schuttinga. He's a psychology professor at North Central University here in the Twin Cities. And we're talking about defense mechanisms. Our brains are very complicated, and boy, do we look for every possible out to protect us, to do self-preservation, to rationalize. And I think we've all done we've all done everything we've talked about at some point today.
I know I have. Certainly.
Yeah, I don't think I've missed one yet. Here's one, Andy, which I'd like your take on it, and that's the idea of trying to make up for when you feel you've had feelings or behaviors that were maybe hurtful. You hurt someone's feelings, so all of a sudden you show up and do something nice for them. Try to assuage your own guilt.
Yeah.
Show up the next day and you're cutting my lawn. I'm going, Andy, what are you doing? I got a lawn guy.
Right. The maybe the most common example of this is a couple has a fight and the husband shows up with flowers the next day.
Sure. What's wrong with that?
Or an hour later.
What's wrong with that?
Well, I actually think there's a lot wrong with that.
Why?
Because you're not if you've completely settled the issue and then you're bringing flowers, okay, fine. But if you haven't settled the situation and then you just do something nice for somebody, doesn't that seem a little disingenuous? Like, hey, I know we had a little problem yesterday, but here's a box of candy. That should take care of it, right? We're good, right? Mm-hmm. And that's you're just papering over the stain on the wall. You're just hanging another picture on top of that hole you punched in the drywall. Right? Mm-hmm. You're just covering something by trying to be nice, and honestly, it might work. Some people might be, I love the word assuaged, by the way.
That's a good word.
Yeah, your guilt may be assuaged.
Ameliorated. That's another word.
Oh.
You know what that one means?
Yes, to make something go away.
Yeah,
Fix it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, big words with Bill. That's a new segment for your show, I think.
Big words with Bill?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a popular segment.
Then I won't patent that one.
All right. That's a long text that just came in. I need to let you talk so I process the other one that's on the screen right now. But let me ask you just a little bit about different types of anxiety. There's, I think I'll call it sin, but if you've violated God's law, that's sin, period.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you've got your own moral principles. And if you violate that, you have some kind of moral ambiguity or moral anxiety.
Oh,
because
yeah.
You didn't stand up to your own standards. You didn't fulfill or meet your own standards.
Yeah, Freud would say that was tied into your superego. Excuse me.
That's all right.
I had used the cough button there. Yeah, we have a cough button here in case you don't know radio.
He used it too.
Oh, I used it big time. So yeah, Freud believed in 3 different types of anxiety. There was moral anxiety, neurotic anxiety, and reality anxiety. And moral anxiety was essentially the fear of violating one's own principles. And I think a lot of people, honestly, I think a lot of Christians struggle with this because they live in fear of doing something wrong and doing something sinful. We do this because a lot of us had great parents who were teaching us what's right and wrong. And back in my day, you got punished pretty severely for some of those things. And so you could become afraid of doing the wrong thing. And you could become so afraid of doing the wrong thing that you stopped taking appropriate risks, or you would be get really upset and anxious about maybe I did the wrong thing. And that's not a great way to live either. And so Freud was right about this moral anxiety that comes from the superego having almost too much power in your decision making.
Interesting. All right, Andy Scotty, here's a message that came in. The reason Minnesotans are passive aggressive is they have a huge guilt conscience developed by repressed Scandinavians. They have to do everything to please the norm of doing good for others. And when they get tired, they get snippy. I love the word snippy.
Snippy. Yeah, I like that.
Snippy.
Okay.
For example, Norma makes 5 pies for the church for a funeral, and then she's asked to work more on Sunday to clean up after coffee. She has a medical condition in which she is supposed to slow down, but she can't say no because she'll feel guilty. So she takes the extra volunteer job and then feels tired and is angry at someone, but she doesn't know who.
Right. And then she makes a passive-aggressive comment that says, sure would have been nice to have a Sunday off, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you're
There's your passive-aggressive illustration.
Yes. Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and I couldn't come up. That was a good one. Thanks.
Yeah, I set you up, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, the texter set us up both.
Yeah, that's true.
Well done, texter. Yeah. And yeah, that's a great explanation. I love that.
Yeah. No, we were talking about, did you mention reality anxiety yet? Have you done that yet?
No, we haven't talked about that.
Okay, because that is probably something a lot of people think about, and that would be the fear of real-world events.
Yeah.
And this is something you can pretty easily identify, I would think.
Yeah, you have a speech coming up. You're a college student, or at work, you have to present. A lot of people get really anxious about that.
Yeah.
That's reality anxiety. I mean, and honestly, you probably should feel a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah.
If that's not something that you regularly do.
Right.
Like I do public speaking every day in my job. I speak in front of dozens of students, or maybe even hundreds if you're in a chapel situation, or anytime I have a microphone, I'm comfortable because that's what I do for a living. But if you're a person who never holds a microphone and somebody says, "Hey, we want you to do this in church in front of 500 people,"
right?
Yeah. And if you feel a little nervous, that's reality anxiety. And that's actually a normal, healthy response.
Or
that's fine.
Maybe something as simple as you had a bad experience with a dog when you were younger. You got bit as a kid or something.
Right.
And then somebody says, well, come on in. Don't worry about the dog. Dog's friendly. And you're just paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
The dog is probably friendly.
Oh, yeah.
But you got something in your brain that says, I ain't doing this.
We have this happen at our house all the time. We have a 100-pound Labradoodle who's super friendly. He loves people, and he's huge. And you can tell when people don't have a real fondness for dogs because their whole body clenches up. They put their hands up by their chest. They turn sideways and they say, oh, that's a big dog. You're like, yep.
That we call that reality anxiety, huh?
Yeah. And then I'll say something helpful like, don't worry, he just likes to eat faces or something like that.
That's
and then,
helpful.
Yeah, super helpful.
So you don't have a lot of people that come over to your house anymore.
Not who don't like dogs.
Right. No, this has been helpful. I think it's good for us to reflect on how complicated our brains can be and how we do look for ways to use defense mechanisms. But let's just say that we always should take every thought we have captive to Christ, and
right on.
God will keep you in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because they trust in you, whose minds are steadfast. So, Dr. Andy Schuttinga, thank you for being here, and have a very lovely rest of your evening.
I will.
Yes.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, Jeff Verdorn is out in the green room, and we're going to conclude our study on 2 Thessalonians. We've been studying 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. This is episode number 15 and our final one. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.